Here's how the Loki finale could set up Young Avengers. Since time immemorial, mankind has looked to the stars and wondered, how many Kangs is too many Kangs? Well, if you ask Marvel Comics, the answer is you can never have too many. And now it seems the Marvel Cinematic Universe might agree, because in the wake of the Loki Season 1 finale, not only did we bear witness to the official birth of the MCU multiverse, but we met the Thanos-level villain of Phase 4, Kang the Conqueror.
This is wild.
Or did we? As comic book readers can tell you, there's a seemingly endless array of Kang variants out there. You've got Rama Tut, Mr. Griffin, Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Victor Timely, Kamala Kang, any of the hundreds of other members of the Council of Cross-Time Kangs out there. The list goes on and on. But with that said, we learn in the Loki finale that he who remains is literally he who remains of all the Kang variants in the wake of a multiversal war. After harnessing the monster Alioth to murder the other variants, he pruned the sacred timeline like a bonsai tree to prevent a new Kang variant from popping up. It's something he claims he's doing to keep everybody else safe. And in his own words, if you think he's evil,
just wait till you meet my variants.
But who is he who remains really? Which of the countless Kang variants could he who remains be? Well, we're gonna run down the likeliest suspects to suss out the truth of the matter, and if we're right about this, well, that could be considered a spoiler, so if you're worried about that kind of thing, walk away now before you see something you probably shouldn't.
Hey y'all!
Alright, let's get into it, shall we? Unlike his comic book counterpart, He Who Remains is actually a variant of Nathaniel Richards, the 31st century scholar who discovers the multiverse and uses time travel to conquer each and every timeline to bring it under heel. He transforms into the tyrant better known as Kang the Conqueror. And in the MCU, He Who Remains does so to put an end to the Kang flick started by his countless variants and turn the multiverse into the sacred timeline. Now, much like Sylvie incorporates elements of Lady Loki and Enchantress into a wholly new character for the series, He Who Remains is an amalgam of comic book influences as well. However, according to director Kate Herron, while He Who Remains is a unique character for their story, he's closer to Immortus of all the Kang variants out there. Now, this tracks with what many viewers noticed. He Who Remains' costume evokes elements of both Kang the Conqueror and Immortus' classic comic book getup, although thankfully without the headpiece for the time being. So, who is Immortus? Well, essentially, Immortus was the future version of Kang, one who manipulates events, timelines, and other Kang variants to ensure that no matter what, whoever reigns supreme, all Kang variants are destined to become him. It's why, as we've mentioned, He Who Remains is so nonchalant about the prospect of Sylvie murdering him, because even if she does it, he'll still eventually wind up right back where he started, sitting here chomping on an apple and reigning supreme over the multiverse as we know it.
Reincarnation, baby.
And while that's certainly a plausible explanation that he's the MCU's version of Immortus, we actually have another theory, one posited by Eric Diaz on Nerdist.com, which I absolutely love. It stems from He Who Remains' repeated assurance that he does what's necessary to keep people safe, and that he is a far better choice to rule than the rest of his variants. So what if this Kang variant is the adult version of the superhero formerly known as Iron Lad, a founding member of the Young Avengers? Like basically every Kang variant out there, this version as well was Nathaniel Richards, born in the 31st century. As a teenage genius, or teenius if you will, he was nearly beaten to death by a bully named Morgan. Hospitalized and grievously wounded, Nathaniel's visited by Kang the Conqueror, aka himself in the future. Kang gives his younger self a suit of high-tech neurokinetic armor and shows Nathaniel his future as this despotic ruler of time and space and eternal nemesis of the Avengers. Kang gives young Nathaniel a choice with the new suit of armor that he's wearing. With a single thought, he can kill Morgan, the person who put him in the hospital. Except Nathaniel doesn't really like what Kang's putting down, so he thinks instead of finding the Avengers to help stop Kang, and he goes back in time to find them. Except Nathaniel's math was a little bit off. He winds up back in the 21st century during a time where the Avengers were nowhere to be found, because they had just disbanded in the wake of the Avengers Disassembled storyline. Now, Nathaniel discovers protocols inside of Vision's body, which are designed to seek out the next generation of Avengers. Taking on the moniker of Iron Lad in homage to Tony Stark, he assembles a group of teenaged heroes who go on to become the Young Avengers. But unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Eventually, Nathaniel realized the longer he stayed in the 21st century, the more the time stream would begin to unravel. So he told his friends about who he really is, or rather who he would become, and reluctantly accepted that he cannot escape his destiny to become Kang the Conqueror. Instead, he promises to become a better version of this time-traveling dictator. Now, that's all well and good, but why does that mean that He Who Remains could be the adult version of Iron Lad? Well, for starters, we know the Young Avengers are being established in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. WandaVision introduced us to Billy and Tommy, who become the superheroes Wiccan and Speed, respectively. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier added Eli Bradley into the mix, the grandson of the super soldier Isaiah Bradley, and Eli goes on to take on the moniker of Patriot in the comics. Then the Hawkeye series will introduce us to Kate Bishop, who becomes the next Hawkeye after Clint Barton, and then Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness will introduce us to America Chavez, aka Miss America, who can travel the multiverse itself with the portals she creates. Then in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we'll meet a newly recast Cassie Lang, who takes after her father as a size-changing superhero known as Stature. But the only major character missing from this equation thus far is Hulkling. With that said, we could easily see him, given that he's a Skrull, being introduced in the upcoming Secret Invasion Disney Plus series. And with a Ms. Marvel series on the way as well, the MCU's version of the Young Avengers could likely include Kamala Khan in their ranks too. And all of this makes us think that we might just get a young Nathaniel Richards when all is said and done after the events of Quantumania to help kickstart this brand new super team. And while that probably won't happen until Phase 5 at the earliest, we have more clues in the Loki finale. This is a version of Kang that used violence as a last resort, it seems. He used the Time Variant Authority to do the ugly but necessary work, in his opinion, of pruning the sacred timeline and giving glory not to himself, but to the Timekeepers, a trio of fictional space lizards he made up as figureheads. If He Who Remains is as noble as he claims to be, this could have been his method of becoming a better version of Kang the Conqueror like he pledged to in the comics, albeit with his idealism tempered by age. Ergo, one could reason that the younger version of this Kang might have been more idealistic, opting for a more peaceful solution before resorting to unleashing Alioth on his variants. So imagine, if you will, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a world where a young Nathaniel Richards arrives in the aftermath of Avengers Endgame and discovers that Earth's mightiest heroes are no more in the wake of stopping Thanos. He could discover Vision's body in Sword's secret lab, he could access protocols inside of Vision's programming, and that would in turn lead him to recruit the next generation of Avengers, the Young Avengers, just like he did in the comics. Now, of course, it will have a tragic ending for old Nathaniel, but given how the MCU is getting increasingly weird with time travel, the multiverse, and multiple variants, it's not that much of a stretch to imagine it happening. As with everything though, only time will tell, and we'll be waiting with bated breath to see what the Marvel multiverse has in store for us. In the meantime though, tell us, what do you think of this theory? Who do you want to see in the Young Avengers? And which variant of Kang do you think that He Who Remains really is?
A jerk.
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.